There is something deeply misunderstood about the person who seems distant, calm, unreadable, and almost impossible to reach. From the outside, they look unaffected by love. They look like the one who can walk away without pain, stay silent without struggle, and keep their heart untouched no matter how close someone gets. People often assume they do not feel deeply because they do not express deeply, but the truth is far more complicated than that. Behind emotional distance is often an emotional world so intense that it learned to hide itself for survival. Behind silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes it is fear, sometimes it is confusion, sometimes it is a heart that wants connection but does not know how to hold it without losing itself. And this is why the story of an avoidant falling in love is never obvious. It does not happen loudly. It does not begin with dramatic confessions or clear signs. It often begins in contradiction. They want closeness, then retreat. They miss you, then disappear. They care deeply, then act unaffected. To understand when the avoidant falls in love, you have to understand that love reaches them differently. It happens slowly, quietly, and often against their own resistance. Because the avoidant does not fear love itself. They fear what love requires. They fear dependence. They fear being seen too deeply. They fear needing someone and then losing them. They fear giving access to the parts of themselves they worked so hard to protect. For many of them, emotional closeness feels less like safety and more like danger. Not because love is dangerous, but because vulnerability once was. So when they meet someone who stirs something real inside them, their first instinct is rarely surrender. It is caution. Their heart may move forward, but their habits pull backward. They may feel drawn to you in a way they cannot explain, yet still create distance. They may think about you constantly, yet take hours to respond. They may crave your presence, yet act like they do not need it at all. This is where many people misunderstand them and walk away too soon. They assume no emotion exists because emotion is not being performed. But some people love in hidden ways long before they know how to show it. Some people fall while still pretending they are standing. The avoidant fears love more than they desire it. In the beginning, because desire feels exciting, but fear feels familiar. Wanting someone creates warmth. Needing someone creates panic. So when feelings start to grow, they often focus on what could go wrong instead of what feels right. They notice how much they think about you and immediately question it. They notice how peaceful they feel around you and then wonder if that peace will cost them their freedom. They notice how much your opinion matters and suddenly feel uncomfortable that someone now has power to affect them. To others, this can look cold, but internally, it feels like chaos. Imagine wanting to step closer, while every instinct tells you closeness leads to pain. Imagine wanting love while being wired to distrust it. This is why their path into love is rarely smooth. It is not because they do not care. It is because caring activates fears they have spent years avoiding. Then something unusual happens. They meet someone who feels different, not louder, not more dramatic, different. Someone whose presence does not feel demanding, someone who does not rush to possess them, someone who carries warmth without pressure, consistency without control, affection without suffocation, and this confuses them more than intensity ever could. They are used to people who chase, react, force and push. They know how to defend against pressure. They know how to retreat from neediness. But calm sincerity, quiet confidence, a person who values connection yet still respects space, that reaches places inside them their defenses were never built to block. At first, they may not even recognize what is happening. They just notice they feel strangely relaxed around you. They notice conversations with you do not drain them. They notice silence with you is comfortable instead of awkward. They notice they can be imperfect without feeling judged. These things may seem small to others, but to someone who protects themselves through distance, they are enormous. For the first time, connection does not feel like a trap. It feels like relief. Still, even then, they often pretend they do not care at the beginning. This is one of the most confusing stages for anyone dealing with them. Because while feelings are growing internally, behavior may still appear detached externally. They may keep conversations casual when they want depth. They may tease instead of compliment. They may disappear for a while right after a meaningful moment. They may act unaffected after spending all night thinking about you. Why? Because caring openly feels risky before trust feels certain. If they reveal too much too soon, they fear rejection. If they depend too quickly, they fear losing control. If they show softness, they fear being hurt where no armor exists. So they hide interest behind distance. They mask affection behind neutrality. They protect longing with silence. But silence has patterns, distance has tells, and the more they care, the harder it becomes to remain truly detached. They start remembering little things you said weeks ago. They notice changes in your mood before others do. They check their phone more than usual. They reread messages they pretend meant nothing. They become aware of your presence in ways they cannot dismiss. This is when the one energy that changes everything begins to matter most: emotional safety, not excitement, not games, not intensity, safety. The avoidant falls in love when love stops feeling like something that will consume them. They fall when closeness no longer feels like pressure. They fall when someone proves that intimacy can exist without control, that care can exist without demands, that commitment can grow without force. Emotional safety is subtle. It is patience without passivity. It is warmth without chasing. It is honesty without aggression. It is having boundaries without punishment. It is making space for someone without shrinking yourself for them. When they experience this, something inside them begins to soften. Their nervous system notices before their mind does. They feel calmer after speaking with you. They feel less need to withdraw. They stop rehearsing escape routes. They share a little more than usual, then a little more again. They laugh more freely. They stay present longer. They begin to trust moments they once would have sabotaged. And then comes one of the most important parts of the story. They start missing you in silence. Avoidants often understand their feelings most clearly when no one is around. Not during the conversation, but after it. Not in the moment of connection, but in the emptiness that follows it. While others process emotions through expression, they often process through absence. So when you are gone, your impact becomes louder. The room feels different. Their routine feels flatter. Things they once enjoyed feel less interesting. They reach for distractions, but still think of you between tasks, between songs, between late-night moments when the world gets quiet enough to hear what they feel. They may never tell you this stage exists, but it is powerful, because missing someone forces honesty. It removes the illusion of indifference. It confronts them with a truth they can no longer outrun. Your presence mattered more than they admitted. They start replaying conversations, remembering your expressions, wondering what you are doing, wondering if you notice their distance, wondering if they pushed too far, wondering why your absence feels heavier than it should. And that weight becomes a mirror. For perhaps the first time, they are not asking how to avoid feelings. They are asking why these feelings keep returning. They are not asking how to stay independent. They are asking why independence suddenly feels lonely. They are not asking how to keep control. They are asking why control feels empty when it costs connection. This is how love often enters the avoidant heart, not with fireworks, but with realization, not through pressure but through peace, not because someone chased them hard enough, but because someone made closeness feel safe enough to stop running from. And once that process begins, they may still move slowly. They may still hesitate. They may still struggle to express what is changing inside them. But make no mistake, something real is happening. The walls are not gone yet, but they are cracking. The silence is not empty anymore, but full. The distance is no longer protection alone, but conflict. Because when the avoidant starts missing you in silence, remembering you in stillness, and feeling safer with you than without you, love has already begun. Because when the avoidant starts missing you in silence, remembering you in stillness, and feeling safer with you than without you, love has already begun. But love beginning inside them does not mean peace arrives immediately. In fact, for many avoidants, this is where the most confusing chapter starts. Because once feelings become real, they are forced to face a truth they have spent years escaping. Distance can no longer protect them from what they already feel. And that is why space often makes them fall deeper in love. This sounds like a contradiction to most people. How can distance create stronger feelings? How can stepping away intensify connection? But for the avoidant, closeness can be overwhelming in the moment. When someone is right in front of them, emotions rise fast, vulnerability becomes visible, expectations feel possible, their nervous system reacts before their heart can speak. They may suddenly feel pressure even when none exists. They may feel trapped even when no one is trapping them. They may need room not because they want less of you, but because they feel too much of you at once. So when space appears healthy, respectful, unforced space, the noise inside them settles, the panic softens, the pressure they imagined begins to dissolve, and once fear quiets down, emotion becomes easier to hear. This is why they often understand your value after stepping back. In the silence, they realize your presence was not the threat they thought it was. In the stillness, they feel how much warmth you brought into their life. In the distance, they begin to miss what closeness made them too anxious to appreciate fully. They remember how safe your energy felt. They remember the way you listened. They remember the calm they felt beside you. They remember the parts of themselves that only seemed to come alive around you. And now, without distraction, those memories grow roots. Space gives them what pressure never can, the ability to choose love freely. When someone chases an avoidant, they often focus on escape. When someone respects space, they often begin to reflect. And reflection is dangerous for someone trying not to feel, because reflection reveals truth. This is when the first hidden signs begin to show that they are secretly falling for you. They may not confess it, they may not even fully admit it to themselves, but their behavior starts changing in ways they cannot control. They become more attentive to small details. They remember things you casually mentioned weeks ago, a favorite song, a stressful day, a dream you once shared. Details others forget become stored carefully in their mind because emotionally significant people become unforgettable to them. They start checking in more often, even if casually. A random message, a simple question, a small excuse to reconnect. They may keep it light because depth still scares them, but the effort itself means something. Avoidants rarely reach out consistently to those they feel nothing for. They become quietly protective. They may not declare affection, but they notice when you are hurt. They notice when your tone changes. They notice when something feels off. And though they may not know how to comfort perfectly, they feel the urge to do something, anything, to restore your peace. They observe from a distance more than you realize. They may watch your social updates, remember your schedule, notice when you go quiet, wonder who is around you, and feel emotions they never wanted to feel: concern, curiosity, jealousy, longing. They begin making room for you in routines once built only around themselves. That may be the clearest sign of all. The fiercely independent person who once guarded every inch of space now starts leaving emotional doors slightly open. And then another shift happens. They begin comparing you to everyone else, not in the shallow sense of appearance or status. Something deeper. They compare how they feel with you versus how they feel with others. They notice conversations with others feel empty, while yours feel meaningful. They notice attention from others does not move them the same way your presence does. They notice that many people can entertain them, but very few can calm them. That realization unsettles them, because it means you are no longer replaceable. For someone who values emotional distance, believing people are replaceable creates safety. If no one is unique, no one has power to hurt deeply. But once they recognize that your presence affects them differently, that illusion begins to collapse. Now they cannot easily tell themselves anyone could fill this role, because anyone cannot create that same peace, anyone cannot evoke that same softness, anyone cannot mirror back the version of themselves they only seem to access around you. And this is where love starts feeling real enough to frighten them. So often, right when things seem to be growing beautifully, they pull away. This is one of the most painful and misunderstood moments in the entire dynamic. You may think everything was progressing. They were warmer, more open, more consistent. They seemed closer than ever. Then suddenly they become distant, quiet, hard to read, or emotionally unavailable again. Why does this happen right when love gets real? Because closeness crossed the threshold from interesting to important, and importance triggers fear. As long as connection feels casual, they can enjoy it. But when they realize losing you would actually hurt, defenses awaken. When they realize your opinion matters deeply, defenses awaken. When they realize they are attached, defenses awaken. To many avoidants, vulnerability feels safest when limited. The moment it becomes substantial, their survival habits return. They may create space to regain control. They may focus on flaws to reduce attachment. They may convince themselves they need freedom. They may become busy, distracted, or emotionally numb. It is not always a rejection of you. Often it is a reaction to themselves. They are startled by how much you matter. Imagine spending years believing you do not need anyone, only to meet someone whose absence can shake your inner world. Imagine building identity around independence, then discovering your heart has chosen connection anyway. That conflict can feel terrifying. So they pull away not because feelings disappeared, but because feelings intensified. And while you may only see distance on the outside, inside them an invisible battle is unfolding. Part of them wants to come closer. Part of them wants to run. Part of them wants to text you right now. Part of them wants to stay silent until emotions calm down. Part of them imagines a future with you. Part of them searches for reasons it cannot work. They miss you while avoiding you. They care while pretending not to. They crave reassurance while resisting intimacy. They want to be understood but struggle to explain themselves. This internal battle is exhausting. Many people assume avoidants enjoy being detached, but often detachment is lonely. Often it is learned protection mistaken for personality. Often it is armor worn so long they forgot where it ends, and they begin. When real love arrives, that armor becomes heavy, because love asks them to feel instead of flee, to trust instead of control, to stay present instead of disappearing into emotional distance. And while some part of them longs for exactly that, another part still believes openness leads to pain. So they may sit alone replaying everything, wondering why they withdrew, wondering if you noticed, wondering whether reaching out would expose too much, wondering why someone who brings them peace also triggers their deepest fears. And the answer is simple though painful: you matter. The people who do not matter rarely activate inner conflict. Casual connections do not shake old defenses. Temporary attractions do not challenge identity. It is the meaningful ones that force growth. It is the rare ones that expose wounds. It is the right connection that often feels most uncomfortable to the unhealed heart. This is why the avoidant can seem most distant when they care the most, because caring deeply places them face to face with everything they have not resolved. But conflict, painful as it is, also signals transformation. The battle inside them means old patterns are being challenged. Their usual escape no longer feels satisfying. Their usual numbness no longer works the same. Their usual independence no longer feels complete. Something in them knows life before you felt simpler, but emptier. And now they stand between two worlds, the old world of safety through distance and the new world of uncertainty through connection. They do not know yet which world they will choose. They may stumble, they may retreat again, they may confuse you while trying to understand themselves. But one thing has already changed forever: they can no longer pretend love has not touched them. Because once the avoidant has felt peace with you, missed you in silence, compared everyone else to your presence, and fought themselves over how much you matter, their heart has crossed a line their mind may still be trying to deny. Because once the avoidant has felt peace with you, missed you in silence, compared everyone else to your presence, and fought themselves over how much you matter, their heart has crossed a line their mind may still be trying to deny. But denial cannot last forever. There comes a point where distance stops bringing relief, silence stops feeling powerful, and avoidance stops protecting anything at all. What once felt like safety begins to feel like loss, and that is where the next stage begins, the stage where patience changes everything. For someone who has lived behind walls, pressure usually strengthens those walls, demands make them retreat, ultimatums make them shut down, chasing makes them feel cornered. But patience does something entirely different. Patience does not force the door open. It creates enough calm for them to consider opening it themselves. This does not mean endless waiting. It does not mean tolerating disrespect. It does not mean abandoning your own needs while hoping they change. Real patience is far stronger than passive suffering. Real patience carries boundaries, dignity, steadiness, and emotional maturity. It says, "I care for you, but I will not lose myself for you." And that energy affects them deeply. Because many avoidants expect one of two extremes: people who demand too much, or people who disappear completely. They know how to respond to chaos. They know how to react to emotional games. But someone who remains kind without becoming desperate, someone who stays grounded without becoming cold, someone who offers warmth without abandoning self-respect, that is rare. It unsettles them in the best way. For the first time, they experience connection that does not punish them for needing space, yet also does not reward endless distance. They begin to see that intimacy can be steady instead of dramatic, that love can be calm instead of consuming, that closeness does not have to erase individuality. Slowly, your consistency becomes a mirror. They start noticing how often they run when things get real. They start noticing how quickly fear takes control. They start noticing that the person in front of them is not the danger, the pattern inside them is. This realization can take time, but when it lands, it changes everything. Because growth often begins the moment someone stops blaming others for wounds they never healed themselves. They may not announce this transformation. Avoidants rarely turn healing into speeches. Instead, it shows up quietly. They become more present. They answer with more intention. They check in without needing a reason. They apologize more sincerely. They begin trying in places where they once withdrew automatically. You may notice it in the smallest moments. They stay in uncomfortable conversations instead of disappearing. They admit when something scared them. They ask how you feel. They share pieces of themselves they once kept hidden. These moments may seem ordinary to others, but for someone built on emotional distance, they are acts of courage. And eventually, a deeper truth arrives. There comes a moment where they realize they are in love, not attracted, not attached, not merely comfortable. In love. This realization usually does not happen during perfect moments. It often happens through loss, distance, or the possibility of losing you. When they sense you pulling away, when life becomes uncertain, when your presence is no longer guaranteed, that is when clarity strikes hardest. Because some people do not recognize value while it is available. They recognize it when it may be gone. Suddenly they feel what they spent months trying not to feel. The thought of losing you creates an ache they cannot logic away. Your absence feels heavier than their fear of vulnerability. Silence no longer feels like control, it feels like punishment. Independence no longer feels strong, it feels lonely. And in that emotional collision, truth surfaces. They love you. They may realize it while staring at a phone they are afraid to use. They may realize it while hearing a song that reminds them of you. They may realize it when something good happens and you are the first person they want to tell. They may realize it when something painful happens and you are the only comfort they crave. Love becomes undeniable when the heart chooses someone in both joy and pain. Yet even after this realization, another painful chapter often follows: regret. Because once they understand what you meant, they must also face how long they delayed. They remember moments they could have been softer, but chose distance. They remember messages they never sent. They remember times you reached for them, and they gave confusion instead of clarity. They remember opportunities for intimacy that fear convinced them to sabotage. Regret is especially sharp for avoidants because they often believed time would wait. They believed connection could be paused and resumed whenever they were ready. They believed feelings could be managed later, but hearts do not remain suspended forever. People grow tired, people heal, people move on, and when they realize you may not always be there, urgency replaces complacency. They begin wishing they had spoken sooner, tried sooner, opened sooner, appreciated sooner. They replay memories not to enjoy them, but to measure what fear cost them. This is where many avoidants learn one of life's hardest lessons. Protecting yourself from vulnerability can also protect you from love, and if done long enough, it may protect you straight into loneliness. Still, regret can become wisdom if it changes behavior. Some will remain trapped in pride, mourning privately while doing nothing, but others allow regret to mature them. They stop romanticizing distance. They stop pretending emotional unavailability is strength. They stop confusing numbness with independence. They begin understanding that courage is not avoiding love, it is risking honesty for it. And then another turning point arrives. They start craving emotional safety more than freedom. This does not mean they stop valuing space or individuality. It means freedom changes meaning. At first, freedom meant no obligations, no expectations, no emotional exposure. But now they see the hidden emptiness in that version of freedom. A life with no one close enough to hurt you is also a life with no one close enough to truly know you. So they begin redefining what freedom actually is. Freedom becomes the ability to be fully themselves with someone and still be accepted. Freedom becomes expressing needs without shame. Freedom becomes not performing detachment every time emotions arise. Freedom becomes resting in connection instead of constantly escaping it. And when they taste that kind of safety with you, old forms of freedom lose their appeal. Random attention feels hollow. Surface-level interactions feel exhausting. Solitude still has value, but it no longer satisfies the deepest part of them. They start wanting something they once avoided: consistency. Not because they became weak, because they became honest. They realize that waking up beside trust feels better than sleeping beside endless options. They realize peace with one genuine person can feel richer than admiration from many strangers. They realize vulnerability shared safely creates a kind of fulfillment independence alone never gave them. This is often when they begin loving differently. When an avoidant truly feels secure, their love can surprise people. The same person once distant becomes intentional. The same person once hard to read becomes observant. The same person once hesitant becomes protective, loyal, and deeply invested. Why? Because beneath avoidance there was often never an absence of depth, only fear blocking access to it. Remove enough fear and depth appears. They may not become the most dramatic lover. They may not flood the room with grand declarations every day, but what they offer can be profoundly meaningful. They remember what matters to you. They pay attention to details others overlook. They show up consistently in practical ways. They protect the relationship because they know how hard it was to let someone in at all. They value what they nearly lost because they understand rarity now. Their affection often lives in actions more than speeches, in reliability, in thoughtfulness, in quiet loyalty, in choosing you repeatedly, even when life becomes difficult. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this: once an avoidant loves securely, they often love with gratitude. They know what it cost to reach this place. They know how many inner battles were fought. They know how close fear came to stealing something precious. So their love carries reverence, not for perfection, not for fantasy, but for the miracle of finding one person who made safety feel possible enough for their guarded heart to finally come home. Not for perfection, not for fantasy, but for the miracle of finding one person who made safety feel possible enough for their guarded heart to finally come home. And this is why their love, once real, can feel so rare and powerful, because it was never given casually. It was earned through trust, awakened through patience, and chosen through transformation. Many people mistake avoidance for people who do not love deeply. But often the opposite is true. They love so deeply that they learn to fear the consequences of loving. They know consciously or unconsciously that attachment has power. They know closeness can wound. They know vulnerability can leave scars. So they become selective, guarded, slow to open. That is why when they finally choose someone with sincerity, it often means more than outsiders realize. It means they crossed internal mountains no one else could see. It means they challenged habits built over years. It means they allowed another person into emotional territory, once kept locked. Their love can feel powerful because it is intentional. It is not based only on impulse or loneliness. It is not simply excitement confused for intimacy. It is the result of wrestling with fear and deciding connection is worth the risk anyway. That kind of love carries weight. It carries substance. It carries depth born from resistance overcome. When an avoidant truly chooses you, they are often saying something far bigger than words like "I care." They are saying, "I trust you with parts of me I once hid from everyone." They are saying, "I am willing to unlearn old survival patterns to build something real." They are saying, "I know what distance costs now, and I no longer want to pay that price." That is rare. But just because something rare is possible does not mean it always happens. Many connections end before they ever reach this stage, and often they end for the same reasons again and again. What usually ruins the connection before it blooms is pressure. Pressure to move faster than they are emotionally capable of moving. Pressure to define everything before trust is built. Pressure to perform love in a style that does not match their nervous system. Pressure to become healed overnight because feelings are involved. Pressure can make even a willing avoidant retreat. Then there are emotional games, trying to provoke jealousy, withholding affection to gain control, using silence as punishment, creating drama to test devotion. These tactics damage most relationships, but they especially destroy fragile trust with avoidance. Games confirm their worst beliefs: closeness is unsafe, intimacy is manipulation, love becomes control. Another common destroyer is abandoning your own boundaries. Some people overgive, overweight, over-explain and over-sacrifice in hopes of being the one who heals them. But self-erasure never creates healthy love. It creates resentment, imbalance, and emotional exhaustion. No one can be loved into healing if they refuse to participate in their own growth. And sometimes the connection fails for a painful reason: timing. They meet the right person while still trapped in old patterns. They care deeply, but lack the tools to sustain closeness. They recognize your value, but only after you are too hurt to stay. This happens more often than people admit, because chemistry without readiness can become tragedy. Yet even when things fail, something important remains. Meaningful connections leave marks. They expose wounds. They awaken desires once buried. They show people what is possible. Even lost love can become the catalyst for future healing. And this brings us to one of the strangest truths about avoidance. Silence often becomes their loudest confession. Many avoidants struggle to say what they feel directly, especially while feelings are still forming. But emotions do not disappear simply because words are absent. They leak through behavior, through timing, through attention, through the things they notice, the moments they return, the energy they cannot hide. Their silence after losing you may not be indifference. Sometimes it is pride fighting grief. Sometimes it is shame over how they handled things. Sometimes it is fear that reaching out now would be too late. Sometimes it is feeling everything at once and knowing no words large enough exist. Their silence during connection may not be emptiness either. Sometimes it is the sound of someone trying to process emotions they were never taught to express. Sometimes it is the pause between fear and courage. Sometimes it is someone wanting to say more than they know how to say. Of course, silence should never be romanticized when it becomes neglect. Repeated emotional absence still wounds, but understanding silence can help people see complexity where they once saw only rejection. Some confessions are spoken, others are lived quietly. A person who keeps returning despite fear is confessing something. A person who watches your well-being from afar is confessing something. A person who changes old habits because losing you mattered is confessing something. A person who becomes softer only with you is confessing something. And if you have ever loved an avoidant, perhaps the deepest lesson is not about them at all. It is about you. The lesson is boundaries. You can understand someone's wounds without becoming responsible for them. You can have compassion without accepting confusion forever. You can love deeply without abandoning self-respect. You can recognize their fear and still honor your own needs. Too many people lose themselves trying to decode someone else's distance. They make another person's healing their life mission. They shrink standards, excuse patterns, and wait for potential while reality keeps hurting them. But love should not require self-betrayal. Your worth is not measured by whether you can make a guarded person open. Sometimes the healthiest love you offer is patience. Sometimes it is truth. Sometimes it is walking away when someone refuses growth. Sometimes it is staying only if mutual effort appears. Wisdom is knowing the difference. And if they truly care, your boundaries often become the very thing that wakes them up. Boundaries reveal consequences. Boundaries separate comfort from commitment. Boundaries show that love is available, but not at the price of your dignity. Then comes the final truth of this entire story. Avoidants do not fall in love because they are chased hard enough. They do not fall in love because someone sacrifices endlessly. They do not fall in love because pressure finally wears them down. They fall in love when love feels safe enough to stop running from. When they meet someone whose presence brings peace instead of chaos, someone who respects space but values closeness, someone who communicates honestly without controlling, someone who remains warm without losing themselves, someone who shows them that intimacy does not have to mean engulfment and vulnerability does not have to mean pain. That is when defenses begin to loosen. That is when old stories start losing power. That is when the guarded heart starts wondering if maybe love was never the enemy, fear was, and when that realization fully lands, everything changes. The person once distant begins reaching closer. The person once silent begins trying to speak. The person once allergic to commitment begins protecting connection. The person once proud of needing no one begins feeling grateful for needing someone trustworthy. Not every avoidant reaches this point. Some remain trapped in patterns for years. Some choose comfort over growth again and again. But those who do the inner work often become living proof that people are not fixed identities. They are patterns that can be healed, fears that can be faced, hearts that can reopen. So, if you ever wondered whether the avoidant can truly love, the answer is yes, but not through force, not through games, not through losing yourself to win them. They love when safety meets sincerity. They love when peace feels stronger than panic. They love when connection becomes more beautiful than escape. And perhaps most of all, they love when someone helps them discover that opening the heart was never weakness at all. It was the courage they had been searching for their whole life.